You heard about that Audemars Piguet and Swatch collab? Of course you have. There's no one at this point on the planet that hasn't. But why would such a high-end brand work with a brand like Swatch? What could they possibly gain from it? Well, people lost their mind for starters. But this video is not about watches. It's about one of the most dangerous moves in branding, which is making a cheap product without cheapening the entire brand. Which begs the question, is it possible to make a cheap product without cheapening the entire brand? I'll be talking about brands that pulled this exact move with wildly varying results, and I'll be giving you some practical takeaways from each. Before I forget, have you heard about Gucci? Have you heard about Tommy Hilfiger? How about all of these brands? Well, these are the brands that my production company has worked with, and so that means that we're involved in these strategy meetings all the time. So a lot of people have looked at this collab and they wonder, why would a luxury brand risk its reputation by making such a cheap product? This isn't the right way to look at it. The cheaper product is not there to replace the expensive one, it's actually just there to advertise it and to give them just a taste of a world that they could never be a part of typically. So although it doesn't quite give them that status of owning a royal oak, it does give them that association with the brand still. And it's very important to make that gap clear. They've effectively had people pay to advertise them. So now, whether or not you're going to be buying their big boy watch, it doesn't matter because their brand is on everyone's mind at the moment. Because luxury brands have to generate that hype, that's what keeps them alive. But at the same time, they have to also play hard to get. They can't advertise in your face too hard, but they still want your attention and they want you to know how valuable they are. If the brand isn't simply known as an expensive brand, then wearing one also carries less status. So most people probably can't afford a Chanel wardrobe, but they could probably afford a Chanel perfume. Same way most people probably won't afford a Dior runway piece, but they could probably get some Dior sunglasses. It's called an entry product. Essentially, the first practical lesson here is that if you own a premium brand, rather than doing some sort of discount to your main product, make an entry product. Because a discounted product makes it feel like maybe you just couldn't sell that item, whilst an entry product is simply an access into your world. For a service business, that might be a paid audit. For a skincare brand, it might be a starter kit. For an expert, that might be a workshop. The entry product might change, but the job remains the same, which is to give a taste of what's accessible in that world, but not to give the full thing away. As long as you make that gap crystal clear that it was in fact a deliberate choice and not made out of desperation. Now, AP knows that they're far beyond the luxury brand. In fact, they're treading on ridiculous pricing territory, even agreed upon by watch enthusiasts. So they knew that it would make no sense to make an affordable option. How can you justify going from an entry point of 20k to $300 to $400? And that's why they needed Swatch to justify it. Swatch knows its role. They're playful, colorful, and they're accessible. That's what protects AP and maintains that oh so important gap that I mentioned earlier. No one is now under the impression that AP has become some sort of affordable watch brand. People know that this is a once in a blue moon move by them, which is part of what generated all that hype. AP also ensured to adopt the colorful nature of Swatch. That way those who bought a Royal Oak don't feel like there's some sort of cheap alternative out there that looks like their watch. In fact, it's not even a wristwatch, it's a pocket watch. So now they've given people emotional access without closing that gap. Which brings us to our second lesson here. Your cheaper product should make your main product more desirable rather than bring it down. The last thing you want is for your premium product customers to feel like their product has been cheapened now. Think about this for your own brand. For instance, if you're a high-end furniture store, then rather than making a cheap version of your main product, make it a fabric sample box. Make it a home accessory. It can easily be a slippery slope, which is what happened to Burberry. Let's talk about what happens when your entry product becomes too accessible. Burberry is one of the clearest examples. For decades, that Burberry check became one of the most recognizable visual codes for British luxury. Then came the problem. They made an accessible cap with that famous Burberry check on it. It was affordable enough that a much wider audience could now afford it. And then in the UK, it started becoming heavily associated with what the media called chaff culture or football hooligans. And luxury brands try very hard to make sure that you make the right associations with their brand. Once Burberry's luxury customers started seeing this check cap everywhere, it turned them away from the brand because it no longer felt exclusive or luxurious to own. So Burberry pulled back. They stopped producing that cap, they reduced the obvious use of their check, and they worked to rebuild their name as that British luxury brand they were once known as. Of course, they still sell caps and hats, but they certainly don't start at £50 anymore. And that's the lesson here. An entry product point can bring new people into the brand, but if it becomes too visible, it can change the perception of your brand. So when thinking about an entry product, you have to ask yourself, is this making my brand more desirable, or is it making it more ordinary? You really don't want your entry product to become the most recognizable product, nor do you want it to be a representation of your entire brand. Here's another great example of how to give access to the masses without making your brand ordinary. Balmain did a collab with H&M, a luxury fashion house teaming up with a high street retailer. Again, super risky move, but Balmain knew of the risk. The launch was ultra successful. Everything sold out, resale prices went crazy, and the chaos was part of the marketing once again, just like with AP and Swatch. The thing about desire is that it's socially created. We only know how desirable something is when we see how badly someone else wants it. So they made it a limited item. Once it's gone, it's done. Real scarcity. That's why drops work, that's why waitlists work. Having said that, do be careful. The lesson is twofold here. Create real scarcity, which will create excitement, which will then become free marketing. So think about your campaign carefully. Just writing something like limited time offer, it's probably not going to get the job done. You've got to give something real to be excited about. This could be done through an unlikely collaboration with another brand, a public waitlist, or a live reveal. Or if you're offering a lower ticket offer, don't just hide it on your website and hope that people find out about it and know why it matters. Give a context, create some tension, give a reason as to why it needs to exist right now. The product matters, certainly, but the story around it is what gives it momentum. Now let's talk about a safer way to do this, especially if you're not exclusively a luxury brand. Fashion brands like Armani have used this for years through diffusion lines. At the top they have their premium lines, and then under that they have their more accessible lines. And guess what? Apple does this all the time too. We know which one of their products are the accessible ones and which one of their products are the flagship ones. There is no confusion there. And the trick is, there's really no space for ambiguity here. It's got to be crystal clear. If the offers are too similar, promise similar things, or the same results, then it's going to be difficult for people to really understand why something costs more than the other. So the most logical option then is just to buy the cheapest one, or even worse, not to buy at all. So the lesson here is very simple. Build a clear ladder. It might start from free content, which builds trust, then a low ticket product, which gives them a tool, then the higher tier product, which finally gives them the implementation. And each step of that ladder should create desire for the next step. The entry offer shouldn't solve their whole journey, it should just prepare them for the next one. Now you know why these types of calculated moves are taken, and you can even implement some of them yourself. Let me know what else you would like me to break down. All these campaign strategies can feel confusing and daunting, especially when you know that it can damage your brand. So if it's something that you think you'd like help with, then we can certainly get you started. On that note, I also made a video that tells you where you're at with your brand content and how to move up to the next level. See you there.